All right, guys, so here we are in Wise, and we are getting ready to add Foley to our footstep sounds. So if you see here, we have an event set up, our footstep event. Let me hit F5. Our footstep event plays footstep terrain, which is this switch container. And right now it's just playing footstep sounds. But we want to add Foley sounds on top of these footstep sounds so that our avatar's run sounds a little bit more realistic. So what the first thing that we want to do, we know, is we want to add chainmail and metal, leather, kind of chainmail clinky sounds to these. So before we go any further, let's just do the basic setup of creating a container for our leather sounds and a container for our metal sounds. So under our actor mixer hierarchy, under default work unit, not under the footstep terrain switch container, go ahead and create a random container and call it leather. And then right click on the leather random container, import audio files, and navigate to the desktop, audio assets, Foley, leather, edited, and here are your leather files. Shift click to select all of them, then import them to your random container, and there they are. All right, now let's create a random container, call it chainmail, and do the same thing. Import audio files, add files, desktop, audio assets, Foley, chainmail, edited. Shift click, select all of my chainmail assets, and add them. All right. Now we have a chainmail random container with our chainmail sounds, and we have a leather random container with our leather sounds. Let's go ahead and test these objects by selecting them and then in the transport control pressing play. All right, so there's our chainmail sounds. There's our leather sounds, but it only sounds like we have two. So let's go ahead and listen to these two. Let's listen to all three of them. I want to make sure that it's playing all three randomly. There we go. Okay, so I heard all three of them randomized in there. That's good. Okay, so now we have these two random containers set up, but we want them to play at the same time. And the way we do that, there's a couple different ways, but right now, the way that we're going to do it, the way that I prefer to do it, is anytime that we want to contain or combine two different objects in Wise, in the audio tab, we want to use a blend container. So we want to blend these two random containers and have them play at the same time. And we're going to have them do that inside of a blend container. So click on your default work unit. It's very important to make sure you have the correct object selected before you create a new object. With the default work unit object selected, up here in the menu, choose Create New Blend Container. And we're going to call this blend container Foley. So select both your chainmail and leather random containers by shift clicking, and then click and drag them into your Foley blend container. So as you can see here, we have our Foley blend container, and if we expand it, we have our chainmail and leather random containers inside of this blend container. So for Foley, this should play both our chainmail and leather sounds at the same time. Let's test that by ensuring that our Foley blend container is selected, and then pressing play in the transport control. All right, so as you could hear, we are hearing both our leather and chainmail sounds at the same time. Now, what we want, the behavior that we want, is to play our footstep sounds and our Foley sounds at the same time, right? But remember that when we go through a wood zone, it's going to switch to our wood footsteps, but we want the same Foley sounds because the terrain is changing, but the armor that our avatar is wearing is not changing. So how do we get our Foley sounds to remain the same, but our footstep sounds to change? So first, let's tackle the problem of getting our footstep sounds and our Foley sounds to play at the same time. Now we're going to use the same trick that we did to get our chainmail container and our leather container to play at the same time. We did that by adding a blend container, right? So now we have a Foley blend container and a footstep terrain switch container. How do we get them to play at the same time? Well, with another blend container. So let's create another blend container, and we're going to call this footstep underscore run underscore final. Just make sure that final is capitalized. Okay, and then we move our Foley blend container into our parent blend container, which is footstep run final, and we move our switch container into our footstep run final blend container. And now, if I expand that parent blend container, you can see I have footstep terrain and our Foley all nested under that footstep underscore run underscore final blend container. So if I play this blend container object, the parent blend container, I should hear footsteps, chainmail, and leather. Yep, and there in the background you can hear the light jingling of the chainmail, and you can hear the creaking of the leather. So let's simulate running into our wood terrain zone and ensure that we could still hear our Foley sounds over our wood footsteps. And again, we do that in the transport control by, in the switches button and the terrain switch group, changing the switch to wood. All right, so we could still hear our leather and chainmail assets playing with our footstep sounds, even if we change the terrain from grass to wood. That is exactly the kind of behavior that we want. Now we have to change our event again, because under the Events tab, if we select our footstep event, we can see that it's playing footstep underscore terrain. And if we test that by selecting our footstep event, remember, this is what's being called from the game, so this is what we have to test to make sure it's working. We're only getting our footsteps and not the Foley. So we need to make sure that this event is playing the correct object, which we combined our footstep terrain switch container with our Foley blend container under one parent blend container called footstep run final. That is the object that we want our footstep event to play. So we have to drag our footstep underscore run underscore final blend container over our play action footstep underscore terrain switch container. And again, we get this confirmation window that asks us if we're sure that we want to replace it, and we click accept. Always a little hasty, but that's what you do. So now we can test our footstep event in the transport control, and lo and behold, wood or grass, we can hear that leather and chainmail over our footsteps. Now, as for my own purposes, that leather is a little bit loud, so I'm going to go into my Foley blend container, into the leather random container. Now, I'm not going to change it on the parent because I only want to affect the leather, and I'm going to take this down about 6 dB in the volume. And let's hear what that sounds like on our event. All right, it's a little bit quieter, but not as quiet as I would like it. So I'm going to take it down another 3 dB to -9 and test it again. That sounds much better. So that's all that we have to do in order for our footsteps to be playing Foley sounds along with them. Now I'm going to save my project. I'm going to generate my sound banks by pressing F7 to get to the sound bank manager and clicking generate, closing that window, and then testing it in Unity. So when I press this play button, I should be able to hear footsteps along with the Foley assets that we added to those footsteps. I should be able to run into this cube here, which will switch our footsteps to wood footsteps, and I should still be able to hear my Foley on top of my wood footsteps when I enter this box. So let's go ahead and test that out. All right, so I could hear that squeaky leather. It's still a little bit loud for my purposes. I would rather make it just barely noticeable. But it is working. We can hear the Foley on top of our footsteps. So now let's go ahead and run into this box, and we should hear wood footsteps and our Foley. Sure enough, we could still hear the leather over our wood footsteps. All right. So we have now polished up our footsteps by adding some Foley audio on top of them, which gives us a lot more detail to our avatar and to our footsteps. In the next video, we are going to look at adding some sounds to our attack animations.